I'm the adult. Child. It's always like trying to put them back into the proper posture and position. And so, but even doing so, the communication in doing so must be authentic and genuine, to where it's not like an attack, or where it's not like we're trying to throw your weight around. There's a way to do it without throwing your weight around, which is without making your child feel small in regards to things like that. But it's definitely a fear, because most women that have not made peace with their past, that has not taken the proper steps to get healed from their past or whatnot. And if they were a teen mom, that's like their fear. Like, what if my daughter, what I've done in regards to becoming a teen mom? But in order for that to be avoided, we have to open up the table to have discussions and conversations, and not just let the fear take over and control the dynamics of the relationship, but allow for the fear to fuel the healing process that can come through the relationship.
Hello, and welcome to the Oasis Space, where we disrupt your current chaos with curated peace. I am your host, Patrice Grimes, also known as the Peace Curator. And let me tell you, if this is your first time joining us in the Oasis Space, I just want to send you a warm, hearty welcome and thank you for tuning in. You know, I know that time is so valuable, and I do not take it lightly that you've taken your time out to spend it with me here in the Oasis Space. So, you know, if it's your first time, I'd like to let you know that you are a peace pursuit, right? You've obviously here because you're here to pursue peace. Someone told you about it. Maybe you found it in the search engine, whatever. But we believe here in the Oasis Space that peace is an acronym for being able to pivot even as chaos ensues. We realize that life happens, right? And we need to know that in order to change the trajectory of our lives, it's what we do in those pivoting moments that changes the trajectory of our lives and how we come out on the other side as triumphant, right? And so part of what we discuss in the Oasis Space is really being able to empower you to transform conflict into peace in various situations in your life, but more so particularly as it pertains to your professions and your personal relationships. So this episode will be like no other, and that I generally provide my personal insight and also bring along some guests that I believe have some valuable benefits to share with you all regarding a specific topic. And so today I am so excited to bring to you all Precious Joy. I know we have been speaking about personal relationships as it relates to some of the most important relationships in our lives. We spoke about the father-daughter relationship. So of course, I want to talk about the mommy-daughter relationship, right? That is one that I think sometimes gets glossed over, but it really speaks to, you know, that relationship speaks to the security of sexual and emotional peace for girls, you know, especially in those formative ages as a teenager. And so I want to introduce you all to Precious Joy because this is her thing. This is her jam. This is what she talks about. And to formally put it, Precious Joy is the founder of the non-for-profit organization Purity is Precious, which is located in Chicago, Illinois. Purity is Precious is known as a double-edged sword positioned to mend and bring healing to mother-daughter relationships and secure sexual and emotional wholeness in teen girls. Precious Joy is committed to seeing women of all ages flourish in healthy relationships that starts at home first. Precious Joy is the author of the book and workbook duo, A Virgin and Miserable. She's also the podcast host of Purity is Precious podcast, and she's an entrepreneur and motivational speaker. So listen, you all, this episode will be like no other of the great people that I bring into the Oasis Space. I love y'all, okay? So I'm not about to bring y'all no mess up in here. So you know it's about to be good. So with that said, I am not going to take up any more time. I'd like to welcome you all into the Oasis Space with Precious Joy. All right, my peace pursuits. We are back for another episode of the Oasis Space with my girl, Precious Joy. I'm so happy to have her here as we have been going through this series talking about how we transform conflict to peace in our relationships and our personal relationships. Particularly, we've talked about some different relationships already, but we're going to get to the nitty gritty in that mother-daughter relationship, right? I think oftentimes we focus so much on the father relationship, right? And that cliche term of daddy issues. But what happens when sometimes the relationship can be strained between mothers, and how does that affect us as we move throughout our adult years, and how we oftentimes even, what decisions we make with our bodies. And so I thought it was great to have Precious here with us to discuss this topic. So welcome, Precious.
Hi, Patrice. Thank you so much for having me on the Oasis Space. It's definitely an honor and privilege to be here. I absolutely love you and what you're doing, and I'm just honored to be able to sit on your platform today. So thank you for having me.
Yes, girl, of course. I'm honored to have you. So, look, girl, let's get right into it, okay? Because, like I said, we know, I think it's so often in society we like to talk about these quote daddy issues, but we oftentimes neglect sometimes the strain or the conflict that occurs between mother-daughter relationships that is so much, that's equally important, if not more sometimes, right? It really forms who we become as women. And we start to see these strains in these relationships. And I kind of want to talk about that. In your experience, when do you start to see kind of the I guess the bumping of the heads, if there's a specific time frame where you kind of start to see a little bit of the breakdown between these mother-daughter dynamics?
Absolutely. One of the things that I've noticed, and even from personal experiences, the breakdown typically starts once we begin to hit those teen years. Like, so from the preteen, I would say around the age of 12, all the way through to like 17 or 18, we start to notice that mother-daughter relationships tend to take a hard hit in regards to like what it is that we have, the type of expectations that we have of each other, what it is that we are requiring of each other. A lot of times there seems to be like a miscommunication or a certain breach in the mother-daughter relationship that does not allow for us to be able to understand and partake from one another without there being a certain level of offense or feeling like we're being misunderstood or not heard and things of that nature. And so every time when we notice this type of pattern, it's usually around the high school years. Once the daughters transition, because what do you hear? You hear the mothers begin to say things like, "Oh, she's smelling herself," or "Oh,
girl, yes,
or, "Oh, she's getting fast," and "Oh, she's this." These are code words when the mother feels like she's kind of losing control or don't know what direction to go in with her daughter or what's really going on. And so what is those code words? Those are also code words that were passed down from generation to generation. So which means that her mother had that said about her when she hit a certain age bracket. And so now she's saying it to her daughter, now that her daughter has hit that certain age bracket as well. And so that's really when we see it start. It usually starts around the preteen years, and it usually goes all the way out throughout the high school years. And once they get through those high school years, it's almost like, oh, dang, maybe mom wasn't that bad. Now that you start to see that there are some more similarities than none.
Right.
The time. But yeah, definitely around the teen years. And that's usually the time frame that we need to pull the daughters closer than push them away.
That's good. And I think one thing that I heard you mention, because I was going to end up asking you, like, why does it occur around this time? What is happening in the breakdown of the relationship? And one of the things that really stuck out to me is when you said there is these expectations of each other. For some reason, there is these expectations of the mother from the daughter. There's expectations from the mother and how the daughter should be performing. And we, like you say, she's starting to smell herself, right? It's this feeling of this lack of control because it seems as if at probably that age, the daughter is probably kind of coming into their own identity at that point. And do you find that it's because, when the mother starts to have these expectations, it's because it's a little bit of a fear that I'm losing some type of grasp on who my daughter is at this point and who she's becoming?
Absolutely. I do think that it is a fear. It's a fear of not wanting your daughter to go down the same path or cycle that you went through in your life. However, if we don't talk about what that path or cycle was, then the daughter would never know what to avoid. And so I feel like definitely it has a lot to do with fear, but typically the shift also comes with the different hormone changes that, young girls typically go through. We can't
Yeah.
neglect the fact that she's going to become moody. She may start her menstrual cycle. Things may start to happen that's even going to alter her mood swings as well. And we have to once remember when we were once upon a time that young or at that particular age, how we felt. We can't necessarily get to a place where we typically disconnect ourselves as if like we didn't have those type of problems or we didn't have those type of hardships as well. There's a lot that goes on mentally with the young girl, trying to understand exactly what's really happening with her body. And also typically when they start their menstrual, they start to think, oh, I'm grown now. I'm a woman. I'm that. And it's like, the mother is like, okay, let's try this again. I'm the adult child. It's always like trying to put them back into the proper posture and position. And so, but even doing so, the communication in doing so must be authentic and genuine to where it's not like an attack or where it's not like we're trying to throw your weight around. There's a way to do it without throwing your weight around, which is without making your child feel small in regards to things like that. But it's definitely a fear because most women that have not made peace with their past, that has not taken the proper steps to get healed from their past or whatnot. And if they were a teen mom, that's like their fear. Like, what if my daughter, what I've done in regards to becoming a teen mom? But in order for that to be avoided, we have to open up the table to have discussions and conversations and not just let the fear take over and control the dynamics of the relationship, but allow for the fear to fuel the healing process that can come through the relationship.
Oh, let the fear fuel the healing process. That's so good. Now, when you talk about that, I know you particularly work with mothers and daughters together. And so when you say, hey, we really have to use this fear to fuel the healing process, what does that look like? How do you even get the mother to recognize that I am actually using fear-based responses to communicate with my daughter right now? And this is not even this trauma does not belong to her. It's really my own. And how do you get that dialogue even going at that point?
So typically on a time when I'm trying to get a mother to actually see that she's projecting her fear, I always take them back to something that may have happened in their childhood that they necessarily have pushed so far down internally that they refuse to look at. Because here's the reality. We all have something or a skeleton in our closet that we have pushed or in our unsubconscious state of mind that we cringe to think about and to look at. And so when they're saying something to their daughter, you have to hear like the keywords. The keywords are typically, I will not have this. This will never happen again. I won't over my dead body. Things of that nature or whatever. When you hear them say certain keywords, it's like, okay, so over your dead body, which tells me that this is a little bit deeper than the surface than what we're hearing or whatnot.
Right.
So what is it in there that we need to find that you have pretty much tried to lay the rest internally that has been rearing its head over time frame, trying to actually provide a way and escape? I talked about a while back about Dear Little Me. And Dear Little Me for me is the little girl that's on the inside of us. She's the one inside of us that never got a chance to heal, that never got a chance to voice her hurt or her pain. She's the one inside of us that has been asking for an outlet. And typically when she's asking for an outlet, her outlet is basically when you hear these small voices in the back of your mind that's actually saying something that you're like, wait a minute, it sounds like me. But when you really pay attention to it, it's not necessarily you. It's the little girl inside of you that has been asking for a way to actually free herself from whatever pain or trauma that occurred that we have learned to live with, cope, and actually mask in our personality.
Wow. That's so good. When you say Dear Little Me, it's essentially this little girl that did not have a chance to heal, did not have this outlet. I know a lot of psychology experts talk about these four things that are needed to feel like kind of secure in relationships, right? And I think from the mother perspective, it's often thought of as mothers provide this idea of feeling seen and feeling soothed, right? As the natural nurturers, that's kind of what they create, that feeling of you being seen kind of underneath the layers. If nobody else sees me, my mom is supposed to see me. They're supposed to understand me. And then the soothing comes in as just kind of the nurturing qualities. And so when you talk about, this little girl never having the chance to heal or having this outlet, it makes me think of some of those qualities that were likely missing, right? That maybe they were not being seen, they weren't being soothed and to feel okay to heal, right? Is that what you have seen in your experience when you talk about not having the chance to heal, or is it from other experiences? Does it vary? What does that kind of look like?
Absolutely. I have seen it and definitely in dealing with mothers and daughters or whatnot. And I've actually experienced it even within myself. And I'm going to say a term or a phrase that I've heard other people say and that I've also experienced within hearing it within myself say. A lot of times when there is a little girl on the inside of you that is begging for healing, you will hear her say the phrase, "What about me?" Never heard someone say, "Well, what about me? I'm always this. I'm always the one on the back burner. I'm always overlooked. I'm always left out. I'm always this. What about me?" So typically when I hear that phrase come out of someone, I'm like, okay, there's a person, a little girl on the inside of you that was not picked to be, on the cheerleading team. There was that did not get the prom queen or whatever, or there's a little girl inside of you that, grew up fatherless or whatnot.
Yeah.
And saw every other girl have a father in her life, or you were the one that had to actually take care of your siblings while all the other kids was able to actually have a childhood growing up, right? Outside playing things of that nature. So it leaves a part of you that feels broken, where the fact you're like, well, what about me? And so typically when we have these conversations with the mother and the daughter or whatever, you will see a little bit of a friction come up when they're feeling like, well, I'm the mother. I'm the one who pays the bills. I'm the one who has everything laid out. I'm the one that has sacrificed so much for you. The surface of that is the little girl inside that's saying, well, what about me? Because I'm the one that's steady being forgotten about and steady being overlooked. And so when you have that come up and when you can actually hear that tone of voice within the mother as she's talking to the child or talking to the daughter, then you start to know, okay, this is a phase right here where we can actually go into and actually start the healing process to start to transform. So, okay, I hear you. Tell me more about that. And so when and that was actually what I had to do with myself or whatever. When I heard the little girl in me say, well, what about me? I instantly stopped and I said, okay, I hear you. And I apologize that you did not get a chance to have an outlet. I apologize that I muzzled your voice over the years. I apologize that I did not allow for you to feel safe. I apologize. I started to just go down this list of running different things down to where I started to not ignore her, but to affirm her. And as I started to affirm her and affirm that she does have a voice and that she does have value, then I saw that I was able to make a drastic change for healing for myself or whatnot. So there was no more condemnation. There was no more shame for things in my past. There was no more hurt and trauma and pain, because finally I took the authority away from the little girl inside, which allowed for her to grow and to mature within and catch up to where I am today. And so that's right there. When you get to that, when you're able to actually narrow down that little girl inside of you, then you can actually allow for her to grow up to where you are. And you would notice that a lot of times the little girl that you have, your daughter, is actually part of the one that's inside of you. You're looking at her, and she's the mirror that's actually reflecting what's on the inside of you in regards to her.
That's so awesome. So I love you say I stopped ignoring her and I started affirming her, because that's so important. I mean, I think, how often do we teach ourselves to ignore what it is that we're feeling, dismiss what it is that we're feeling, that we minimize what it is that we feel or how we see ourselves, etc., or what someone else has said, and instead of affirming who we really are and who we're called to be. And that makes such a huge difference. But I don't want to gloss over the fact, Precious, that you were at that stage, and not everybody gets at that stage so quickly, right? I mean, we have grown people, right? Like you say, we have mothers and daughters that are going through this, and it's not just happening in the teenage stage, right? So we do see it go into adulthood from time to time, right? And I'm assuming this is how it transitions into adulthood when those two individuals, when those two women have not spoken to the little girl inside of them. And so, is that what you believe, that until they actually have that conversation with the little girl inside of them and have that dialogue, then it is something that will carry over into adulthood, essentially?
Absolutely. A lot of times we say, I'm not going to do things like how my mother did it. I'm going to do things totally different. And yet we find ourselves in our older years and our more mature years doing things the very same way that our mother did it, right? Even though we hated or might have disliked it, strongly disagreed with some of her methods that she used while raising us, we still find ourselves actually mimicking certain behaviors. And a lot of relationships are extremely estranged when it boils down into the adult years, because there are just so many things that we've managed to sweep underneath the rug that we don't want to address, even in our relationships with each other. And so even in my adult years now, me and my mother have a very good relationship, a very solid relationship. And she would tell you straight out that she literally thought that once I finished high school, I was going to move far away. And she would probably never see me again, or out see me once a year or something like that. And honest to God, I had every intention to do just that.
You was gonna hit it.
I was gone, girl. I mean, I came out of high school in 2005, and I tried to move to New Orleans. Pretty much, actually, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to be exact. I wanted to go to Southern University. Here I am in Chicago, Illinois. And Southern University every bit of 13 hours away. So yeah, I was trying to get so far away or whatnot so that I can actually live my life and actually start to find myself and things of that nature. And so, Lord behold, couldn't leave, didn't get a chance to actually go or whatnot. And thank God I didn't, because that same year, if I'm not mistaken, that was when Hurricane Katrina hit. And he would have been down there during that time frame. And so God had it where he would not allow for me to even head in that direction. So it still forced me to be at home, to actually be in the company and the presence of my mom, even though I was trying to run so far away. But as we began to stay closer and it left us in a place where we had to work through the differences, where I had to start to see the value in her. I had to start to actually know that she was not against me, but more so for me, and that her protection was done in love and not necessarily to be spiteful or to, prevent me from enjoying life and having the fullness thereof. And so relationships typically with mother and daughters, if they are swept underneath the rug, then we don't get a chance to actually unravel them. So sometimes we need to be forced to be around each other or closer to each other, where we make time for each other to start those healing phases and those healing processes. And so in my particular case, I was thrust into it, pretty much thrown into it. But it was one of the best things that could have ever happened, because here we are. Yes, it's about 20 years later. But had I would have went to New Orleans, had I would have left, we probably would not have gotten a chance to really sort through and fix the relationship. And I love the fact that even my mother, we was just talking about it a couple of weeks ago, she literally said to me, she said, you know what? You wasn't able to start your healing process until I started to heal. And so when she saw that there were things that she needed to start to look at within herself and to start to change within herself, she started to make the necessary adjustments just because she wanted to be a better person. Not necessarily knowing that it was going to actually boomerang or ricochet off of me. But when she started to actually take those steps, then she started to see that my personality flaws and character traits that were completely off the wall, because I was off the chain, my character flaws and things of that nature started to smooth out more. And so it was like I was starting to get more comfortable in my own skin. So we failed to realize that mother-daughter relationships are more pivotal now than they have ever been beforehand. Like, we tend to think that we can do things without each other, or I would not be disappointed. I don't expect much from her. But typically, you do need your mother to heal for the daughter to heal properly and effectively as well.
And I don't even think people recognize when your mother made the statement of, she needed to heal so that you could start your healing process. We don't oftentimes recognize how our healing is attached to other people. You know what I mean? Like, it really is a catalyst to helping someone else heal. And so, I mean, you want to do it for yourself, but particularly when you have children or siblings or whoever, somebody is you care about, it's almost kind of like it's like a double bonus. Like, you want to do it for yourself, but you want to also be better for those other people. You want to heal so that they can heal. And so I really love that. And I also just want to get into, because like you say, when we talk about how often it is that we will sweep these things under the rug, I think of how common that can be, just thinking about women in general, how I think accommodating we try to be to each other, right? And to each other's feelings. And I'm going to just let this go. And I'm just not going to worry about this again. I think we naturally will default to maybe it's not this big of a deal, or maybe I should just let this go. Even though we have these expectations of each other, you kind of just minimize it and you just kind of sweep it under the rug. So I thought that was interesting too, how you mentioned it was something that you all were sweeping under the rug for a while until you were forced to really deal with it head on,
Right. A lot of times we make ourselves become numb.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of us really facing things head on, we use a numbing process to where we feel as though I would never be hurt again by her. I would never put any expectations in her or in him or in whatever. And so that's us basically disconnecting from our femininity, which allows for us to be vulnerable. It allows for us to be dainty. It allows for us to be soft. It allows for us to be human. And when we make those decisions to actually start to medicate certain wounds with being completely numb, then we rob ourselves of the opportunity to become our best version of ourselves, not just for us, but for those who are attached to our call and our purpose.
Girl. Okay, look, that was so much right there. But what I actually want to kind of circle back, because I feel like you don't get into this type of work by happenstance. And so I'd love to know what drew you to this line of work. What made you feel like I really need to help mend these relationships between mothers and daughters, like understanding the dynamics. Talk to me, tell me a little bit what made you want to pursue this and understand this as your purpose.
I never really paid attention to the mother-daughter dynamics starting off, to be honest with you. I just knew that me and my mom had worked through some kinks and we had a great relationship. And we have a relationship where we can say exactly how we feel to each other, and it's no hurt, harm, or anything in that. And we able to move forward and continue to, grow together, right? So I didn't think anything of mother and daughter relationships, but I started to notice it when my friends who would come around and see our relationship, they would say, "I love you and your mom's relationship." Your mom have such a great relationship. Like, they would always reference to it. And my reply would be like, "Child, it wasn't always like this." Like, and I would just go it off and keep moving. Like, didn't think anything of it. It was very, I guess, minute to me. But plus, multiple different friends would, come around or sit and actually see my encounters with my mom and have conversations with my mom. And then they'll be like, "Your mom is just so wise." And I'll be like, "Is she?" So many things just easily go over our head when you're always around the person, but other people can actually see the value and the benefit and the other person connected to you. So that would be what was happening. I had so many people that would comment in regards to our relationship. And then as I would begin to see their relationships with their mom, I would see the friction. I would see how there were family issues that they would not be able to address and talk about, or the mom would be wrapped up in alcoholism, or and everybody in the family knows, but nobody does anything about it or addresses it because whatever's under the surface is too painful for it to address. But at the same time, it has affected the daughter. and the grandmother don't want to touch it. So we're talking about generations of how this thing has been passed down. And so I sat back and I would look at these different dynamics in regards to people that were associated with me or whatever. I started to realize, like, wow, me and my mother really do have something, special here. We have something good. And it didn't make me feel like I wanted to keep it to myself. It made me feel like mother and daughter relationships are valuable. And in order for women to be able to see other women and be respectful and honorable and protect the value of another woman, because that's one thing that we as women lack. We don't protect the value of other women, whether we know them or not. But when you have a healthy mother-daughter relationship, or when that has already been engraved into you to be able to understand that, mother-daughter relationships are vital and that you protect the value of each other, you honor each other, you reverence each other, then that's when we can actually have a wonderful relationship with women. Women would not be so estranged or feel like they can't have conversations or feel like they can't be in a room with each other.
Right.
They can't do outings or whatnot. A lot of the things that we have programmed in our mindsets in regards to relationships with other women is because we did not have a healthy relationship that started at home with our moms. And so when I started to notice that breakdown, and when I started to see that even in my friends, I started to talk to my mom, and I was like, you know what? I think that we might need to start to head into this direction with helping mother-daughter relationships, because it is definitely needed and valuable.
Yeah, you so right. And when I even think, as you were speaking, right, it made me think of an incident when I was younger. I was a teenager, and I remember going somewhere, and this girl around my age said something similar. Like I want to say we were maybe at a conference, or we were somewhere out, and I had gotten upset with my mom about something. And I think I might have mumbled under my breath. So I'm like, man, get on my nerves, or something like that, right? Something just very simple, right? And her eyes got so big, almost with glee, like, I knew it. Me and my mom always said we knew y'all relationship could not be that great. It had to have been phony. And it was almost like a joy for her to feel like there was some validation of thought that a mother and daughter could not actually have a good relationship. And again, like you say, around those teenage years, right? And so when you mention about how that shows up in other relationships with women, and the kind of this competitive nature and like this cattiness, right? A lot of time it goes back to that mother-daughter relationship that you pointed to. And I love that that's something that you and your mother ended up realizing that is so important and so needed, right? So that you can help other people. So now I would kind of want to get into how you have connected, because I know you said initially you had no intentions of working with the mother-daughter dynamics, right? So you were essentially just focused on the teenage girls, right? So talk to me a little bit about that, and kind of what your thoughts were, or how you were working with them, and how you then looped in the mother-daughter relationship to recognize how important that dynamic was.
Yes. So my organization, Purity is Precious, was always centered towards teen girls ages 11 to 17. Originally, when I started it, it was mainly to just focus on sexual purity, mentally, emotionally, and physically. Because what I discovered is that if we want to try to prevent the teen pregnancy, try to prevent girls from being taken advantage of by older men, which was something that I actually had experienced firsthand. That was the gist of us, why I wanted to start this organization. It was to not let them go down the road of being promiscuous, and not allow for them to be, taken advantage of, not allow for them to be used and abused and things of that nature. And so as I started to actually start this organization and develop it, I noticed that it was always like a missing link or missing component, because of course I would get parents and mothers that would love for their daughter to be a part, that their daughters wanted to, and the daughters never wanted to be a part.
Right. Of course.
That was the funny thing. The daughters never wanted to be a part, but I would always get these mothers that saw the value in the program, or that would be devastated because they may have found out that their daughter was sexually active or something like that. So, and their daughters were young. I'm talking about 13 and, 14,
Yeah.
that nature. Like, we wasn't really even considering sex at that time frame when I was terrified to even engage in it, you know? But now I would have like mothers coming to me devastated, and I would get like some before when my program first started, people had my personal cell phone number. Girl, I was getting text messages like 3 in the morning. Like the mama was up at night and couldn't sleep. I would wake up to like these text message threads. So they're letting me know what they done found out that their daughter is doing in the whole nine. And I would be like, okay, like you can fix this, you can try to, but it would be so interesting, like to see the need for it and how many mothers wanted it and desired it. But what I started to notice is that it must include the actual mother to be a part of it to be effective. And so, yeah, you can drop your daughter off at my program on the weekend when I was holding those classes and things of that nature. But at the same time, it needed to be a priority where both of you saw the benefit in it while by partaking and participating in the program. And so for me, as we will begin to actually start these programs. Now, I did get a little intimidated because at one point in time, I was like, okay, I have girls here that are still virgins, and then I have some that are active, and then you start to think like, can I put them in the room together, or would they taint the other or curse the other? Starting out. And what I started to notice is that when I was started to do certain like icebreakers and games and conversations with them, the girls that were sexually active actually started to form back into like, the little girl that they were. And that was what I started to see it. Because, they say sex matures you, and that when you have sex or whatever, you start to think that this is too little for you. I'm above this. And that would be how some of their demeanors and postures would be when they would come in, and they'd have an attitude with me and the whole nine. But as we started the actual, games and the icebreakers and getting to know each other, I instantly saw how they would all revert back to being little girls at their age. Yeah. And it was an eye opener for me. And so I started to realize that in order for us because I noticed that I kept hitting brick walls at a certain time frame. And I said, okay, for this to be happening, I need to know the mother's story. Because until I know the mother's story, until the daughter knows the mother's story, then this is going to be a repetitive cycle that's going to be passed down from generation to generation. We cannot expect for our daughter not to be a teen mom. If you was a teen mom, grandma was a teen mom, and great-great-grandma was a teen mom. Somewhere along the line, something is going on, or someone is not addressing something or being honest and upfront with something for this actually to stop the generational curse that we might be seeing unraveling before us. And so it wasn't until I started to really look at it from a different angle that I was like, okay, I can see exactly how, in order for us to change the dynamics of each individual, because yes, we could put them in a group, but they are still individuals. We have to understand how each individual functions. And so I don't necessarily deal with any of my girls on a scale where I just think that they all fit into the same box, because they don't, regardless of their sexual status. They don't all fit into the same box. They have different stories, different purposes, different reasons for life that's been tagged to them, and that they've been placed here on earth for me to be able to help them unravel. But I need to help them to see the value in not only just their story, but the story that their mother carries as well.
That's good, because I think, to your point, right, when you mentioned earlier how the mothers sometimes forget what it was like to be a teenager, the teenager don't know what it's like to be an adult or parent, and they forget that the parent was once a teenager, right? It's the reversal. So it's like this whole idea, like you say, you get this attitude or you got this mindset of you can't tell me nothing, but it's like I was a teen before. I know what it's like, but it's kind of, again, that role reversal, and that I think it's a even exchange of ideas where both have to be open to acknowledge, like you say, their story and their truths and what kind of got them there. So I really love that. So I think the kind of the final thing that I would ask is, when you go through this process with the mothers and daughters, or if someone is, those that are listening right now, what would you say is some of, I guess, the key identifiers that parents can look for, or can I guess what I want to ask is, what are some key signs or identifiers for parents to look for, mothers, I guess, to look for, to acknowledge and say, hey, this is something that I need to start having this dialogue with my daughter? Because I think it's again, part of it is the self-awareness, but if they don't know that they have this story themselves, as a little bit of what we talked about earlier, of this little girl on the inside of them that wasn't healed, how do they get to the point of knowing that this is something that, or a dialogue they need to have with their daughter, so they can discuss the whole sexual purity or how they, their sexual behaviors with their body?
I think that mainly we all know of a situation that may have occurred in our lives that definitely played a part of trauma. And it's never a situation where we can say, well, I did not know, or I chose not to. You chose to just overlook it, basically. There is something that may have occurred that, let me just say it. Let me switch gears a little bit, because I don't want to go so deep, but I want to be. Okay, so let me say this way. A lot of times there are things within us that we typically know are at the surface and at the core of us that we typically try not to acknowledge. And when we try not to acknowledge it, then that's just us pushing it further back. We're trying to act like it does not exist. It never happened, and it did not hurt us. And the reality is that when we pay attention, and when you look at your daughter's behavior, or when you're looking at your own behavior, there are certain things that we operate out of that are potential prohibitors to our future and to our purpose. One of the things that I've even noticed with me, because I love to be transparent and open, is that I tend to operate. And I was literally just on the phone with my best friend before we jumped on this. I said to her, I believe I operate out of self-sabotage. So there are certain things in us where, when certain opportunities come up, or when certain experiences happen, that can actually usher us into a whole nother phase or into a whole nother avenue of greatness. If you self-sabotage those opportunities, then there is something that's on the inside of you that tells you that you're not good enough, that tells you you're not worthy, that tells you you would never be considered for this. There is something that goes on. So some of the key factors could be self-sabotage. Some of the key factors could be abandonment. It could be being an orphan, because I talked about also, you can have a mother and a father that you grew up with and yet still be an orphan. Because when they say someone is an orphan, that may mean that the mother or the father both have died or something like that. But what is it like when you grew up in a household and you have both parents, or you have one parent, but they were still not necessarily there physically, mentally, and emotionally for you? So that's still like the context of growing up in the context of a household being an orphan. And so when you look at certain dynamics or whatnot in regards to how you perceive things and how you receive things and how you give things out, you can start to identify where there are certain spaces within you that needs to be looked at, that needs to be healed, that you may be getting ready to pass down to your daughter if you don't take the proper necessary steps to actually look at why you are self-sabotaging, why you are operating out of abandonment, why you don't expect for people to defend or protect you. You could be someone that's just more so hot-tempered, and that says whatever you want to say, when you want to say it, how you want to say it, or whatnot. So if that's typically you, then you would know it's because there is a defense mechanism somewhere that you are, that's using it, that's camouflaging as part of you or as part of your personality. Whereas in actuality, it is more so that broken part of you, that little girl that experienced that trauma, that pain that had happened and that occurred, which is actually now the driving force in regards to how you are training and raising up your daughter.
Wow. That's so good. Whew. Girl. Okay. I think I said that was the last question, but I fibbed. So one more. So I'm sitting here thinking of the listener that is like, okay, Precious, this is all good. You're speaking my language. You telling my story right now. You all up in my business, but they may be like grown, right? Because we kind of reverted back to the teenage girls as well. But now, what about for those daughters that are grown, well into their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even maybe, and they realize that part of why they have not healed is because of a strained relationship with their mother. I know oftentimes we focus so much on, saying we need to heal ourselves, but your theory here is a lot of times sometimes the healing is connected to that actual mother and the mother healing. What would you recommend the steps be for that person in that situation? Is it to reach out, to try to communicate, to build that relationship, start healing those wounds, or do they try to do as much healing as they can personally before reaching out? Like what is the, I guess, optimal step, if there is one in particular?
Actually, there is. And I know that even go a little bit more deeper, sometimes the mother has transitioned and passed on. So they don't have the opportunity to reach out to the mom and get to the actual, the core of having conversations. And even sometimes a lot of mothers are not going to be open to having those conversations, depending upon how painful the experience has been for them. But the healing actually does start within ourselves. So one of the things that I always encourage people to do is to center yourself where you get quiet. I love to put on some form of instrumental music because it's definitely a way to bring a form of calming us down. And I would usually get a notebook and just start to pretty much write, whatever it is that I hear, or the verbiage, the dialogue, the things of that nature or whatnot. And so as I begin to write whatever it is that I hear, I allow for myself to become open to the possibilities of what the universe or God, we're going to talk very broad.
Right. We know people subscribe to different things.
Exactly. I'm cool with that. But I would definitely ask the universe, God, the Holy Spirit, whoever, to bring to your awareness things that has happened in your past that needs to be healed. And even though we may know something or we may know what needs to be healed, a lot of times it's going to be something else that was underneath what we thought we knew. And so as we get to that place or whatever, as those things start to come up, then you start to unravel them. You allow for yourself to sit in that space. You allow for yourself to feel the pain because so long we've been trying to push the pain away. But you allow for yourself to become one with whatever that pain is, one with whatever was said, one with whatever was done to you, one with whatever made you feel less than or whatever it may be. And then as you begin to feel it, you identify what this pain is. God, I feel the abandonment. I feel the rejection. I feel the humiliation. I feel the trauma. I feel the pain of whatever this may be. And one thing that I've noticed, because I've done this process many times, the pain would normally come where the wound is sitting at the most.
Ooh.
So that means that if you have an example from me again, so I've always got in trouble for the things that I say. I've always got the smart mouth. You can see I got the gift again. I've always gotten in trouble for things that I say. And so one of the things when I do remember me sitting in a space where I was allowing for God to heal me of some traumas, of some pains, of some hurts and things of that nature, the most pain that I felt, it literally came through the throat area where I literally felt like I was being strangled by or whatnot, because for so long it was always, you always saying something. You always this, shut up. I always had those type of different accusations or whatever. And so the pain was so intense that it literally came from my throat area and it wrapped up to my head, to the back of my head, literally. And so when I felt that, I knew that those were the accusations, the words, the things that I had muzzled internally. And those thought processes that came to me that I would not allow myself to voice or myself to verbalize, or that those even those words that were said that I stored in my unsubconscious state of mind, because they were things that were said to me that were hurtful, that were traumatic or whatnot. And so I started to notice that when you are sitting in a place and wherever the most hurt and the most pain or the accusations are at, it will manifest physically on you. But all it is just that it's releasing. So it will get extremely painful. But if you sit in it and you allow for the tears to come and you be very open to it and you just pretty much say, I surrender. Surrender is a big. I surrender this trauma. I surrender the hurt or whatever. And a lot of times certain visions will come up to you. You may flash back to a certain room that you was in when an encounter had happened. You may flash back to a certain church environment because church hurts do occur. You may flash back to a physical fight that you might have had with someone. And when you see yourself flash back to those things, don't just ignore it. That's actually the universe, God, the Holy Spirit bringing it to the forefront so that he can actually heal that part of you. And so if it's a certain argument that happened with your mom, and then all of a sudden your mother died 2 weeks ago and you got that type of regret and guilt from whatever that was or whatever, allow for yourself to feel that pain, to feel that hurt, so that you can actually begin to allow the trauma of that situation to free itself. And so once you actually get past, once you feel like the weight of it lets up, because you will feel the difference of it. Once the weight of it lets up, then you can get to a place where you start to forgive. You know, you say, I choose to forgive myself. That's a huge one. Like, huge. Exactly. We can forgive other people, and you really can't forgive no one else until you learn how to forgive yourself first. So once you start to forgive yourself, everything at this particular moment is strictly about you. It's not about anyone else. It's not about what someone else has done. Even though we're looking at the fact that we want to heal this part with this person, it's not about this person in the beginning stages. It's all about you and you actually getting yourself to a place to where you start to forgive yourself so that you can move into the place of forgiving someone else. And so after you start the process of forgiving, then you get to the place where you allow for yourself to be forgiven as well. So I choose to forgive myself, and I allow myself to receive the forgiveness of someone else, whether they verbally say it or not. Right. You don't need a verbal enunciation from people. A lot of times you're not going to get that. And so we're not even going to anticipate it, and we're not going to look for it. But once you start to forgive, then you can begin to pray for them, and then you want to send blessings to them. That's pretty much how you begin to move. So it would be one thing, one moment, and then God will show you something the next. So it's like a process.
Yes. I love it. That's so good. So helpful. Man, this is such a good conversation, Precious. And I know we could go on and on, but I'm not, because I know you got stuff to do. And I want to honor that. And but this has been such a good conversation. I know this has provided so much value for the listeners. So one thing that I like to do at the end of all of my episodes with my guests is these rapid value questions. And it's just my way of kind of wrapping up with a bow, because y'all already have provided so much value on these episodes, but it's just a little extra bonus. So it's 4 questions. It is literally the first thing that comes to the top of your mind. No right or wrong answers. You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So what is the one thing that you like to do to sustain or reset your peace?
Dance.
Girl, me too. Yeah. Okay, so I'm for real coming to Chicago. Okay, we yes. All right. Name one book or song that's helped you to define peace.
Oh, wait. I love Psalmist Rain. And the one song that I have to hear her sing every day is Abba Father. I just love the different names of God that she sings over and over, just reiterating who he is. And that's my soothing right there.
Yes. Okay. Question number 3. How do you define peace for yourself now?
Peace for myself now is in the unknown. It is knowing that God got it. It is knowing that regardless of how I feel, I choose to rest and trust in him. And it is knowing that as long as God called me to walk on waters, I'm going to walk with him.
Yes, girl. Okay. Last question. It's a fill in the blank. It's three blanks. The first one will be easy. It's your name. Okay. So it is my name is blank. And without peace, I'd probably be blank. But with peace, I am blank.
Okay, so my name is Precious, and without peace, I would be the bird that flew over the cuckoo's nest for sure. But with peace, I am grounded, I am whole, and I am protected.
Yes, let's go. Come on. Yes. Thank you so much, Precious. This has been so amazing. And thank you again for joining me here in the Oasis space.
No problem. Thank you so much for having me, Patrice. This was definitely fun.
Yes. Love you, girl. Bye.
Love you too. Bye bye.
Man, oh man, wasn't that good? I told you all. I told you that Precious was coming to bring that good information. I really loved how she went into details about how, as mothers and daughters, you have to really come on the same page and understand one another. Oftentimes, as mothers, you may forget that what it was like to be a teenager. And then, as a teenager or a young adult daughter, you forget that your mother knows what it was like to be your age at some point in time. And oftentimes I would say what Precious was sharing is how, we may have our own traumatic experiences and that carries over into our daughters. And it's really us responding out of fear instead of wanting to be vulnerable and share, well, this has been my experience. So it helps the daughter understand where the mother is coming from. And so I really love how she went into those details about how important it is to get the mother and the daughter on the same page, to be willing to share their experiences, so they can come to an understanding of what the other is feeling. And then also, one thing that Precious brought out was speaking to the little girl in her, right? As mothers, as grown adults, sometimes we have to speak to that young girl that did not have the opportunity to heal. And I really loved how she says how she would speak to herself as a little girl to really figure out what it was that she was feeling, to process how her emotions were showing up. And that's so vitally important as well. I think it's important to have those types of conversations, particularly as it pertains to transitioning into adulthood or just various places in your life as we go through these different circumstances and scenarios. We recognize how we may be mimicking some of our parents' behaviors as daughters, or mothers may realize our daughters are mimicking behaviors, and that can bring forth some fearful thoughts as well. But how do we transition those relationships to be peaceful instead of a place of conflict? And so I just love all the great information, so many great things that she shared that I obviously don't have the time to summarize, but I would say you need to go back, take your notes, whatever you got to do to make sure it all sinks in, because it was just such a good so much good information. So if you'd like to connect with Precious, you can connect with her at Purity is Precious, and as well as Precious_Joy 30, and that's the number 30. She's on Instagram in both of those spaces. And you can also reach out to her on her website at www.impreciousjoy.com. Of course, that is some good information that she has there. If you'd like to work with her directly, you can. And I will, of course, include that in the show notes. Separately, if you found some value in this episode, I say this all the time, sharing is caring. Please do not hoard this information to yourself. Even if you don't think it is 100% applicable to you, it may be applicable and resonate with someone else. But I like to believe if you've gotten this far, you do feel that something resonated with you, right? So don't keep this information. Share it with someone, rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast for more great content. And then again, I always love to hear from you all. I find joy that even if the episode is weeks old, I find so much joy when people reach out to me and say, tell me the key takeaways they got from the episode or what they are automatically applying into their lives immediately. I love to also just hear questions, or if you have feedback for episodes, if it's something that you're like, Patrice, this is something I'm struggling with, and I realized this episode made me think of some additional questions I may have or some additional content that I'd love for you to discuss on this podcast, I am 100% open to that as well. So my contact information will also be in the show notes for you to engage with me. Until next time, I want you all to live your best life and embody peace without ever compromising your authentic identity. Love, light, and especially peace. Later, y'all.